Okay, welcome to another episode of Thoughts and Bolts. I'm Pedro. Today we're going to go over the Trans-en-Provence case from 1981. Trans-en-Provence is a town in southeastern France near the border of Italy. The French Space Agency, the CNES, has a UFO office which does studies on UFOs, peer-reviewed scientific studies. It's called GEPAN. And this is a very old effort. It's older than 40 years old, and they've done great work. Now, let's get into the case. 1981, 5 p.m., the witness was working behind his house where he heard a faint whistling sound. He saw a silent, non rotating craft descending from the sky, and it continued to descend and approach near his cabin, and it landed briefly. Okay. And then it took off in a northeast direction. Okay. So this thing landed, and this is the witness's description of it. Okay. So this is what the witness said he saw. Gepan was on the case. They did some really great work. They took pictures of the landing site. As you can see, there's this ring around where the thing landed. But they also took soil and vegetation samples from the very center of the landing site um, out to various distances away from it. Okay. So there were at least 8 different distances, and they took vegetation samples from each one of those distances. Okay. And they did some scientific studies about 4 different kinds of tests. Here's some of the raw data. There's a lot more. I'll put a link in the description of the report so that you can read it for yourself or use a GPT to translate it. But I want to focus on some of the conclusions. Okay. So, first of all, the leaves near the phenomenon. Okay. So, the phenomenon being this ring on the ground. Okay. The leaves near the phenomenon showed pigment degradation. Okay. And there was a quantitative correlation between the disturbance levels and distance from the phenomena center. Okay. So, the leaves near the phenomenon showed pigment degradation, but so there was damage to the vegetation the closer one got to the interior of the ring. Okay, so that's interesting. Um, Also, the sugars and amino acids showed quantitative changes. Okay, young leaves evolved toward a chemical profile typical of older leaves. Okay, so there was premature aging. Okay, and also there was radiation. Okay, the Medicago samples. Okay, Medicago is a type of weed that was growing on that ground, had been damaged. Okay, and this damage was similar to damage that has been observed in Arabidopsis thaliana samples, which had been irradiated with gamma rays at 10 to the 6 rads. Okay, so rads are a unit of radiation. Okay, so the kind of damage evinced at this site to the Medicago samples was the kind of damage a different plant in a different place had received when it was irradiated with gamma rays at 10 to the 6 rads. Okay, and that's interesting. Now, what could have caused this? Okay, we got not just pigment degradation and these effects being amplified at the center of the phenomenon and less so the further away one gets from the phenomenon, and that this also involved premature aging of the leaf samples, okay, and damage that's consistent with intense levels of radiation. What could have caused that? Well, if you look at Hal Puthoff's paper, which was published in 2012, okay, so 30 years after this event happened, Hal Puthoff wrote a paper on engineered space-time metrics, or what's called in pop culture warp drive. So Einstein's equations do allow for warp drive. It is physically possible. Okay. And what happens in an engineered space-time metric, according to the math, is that time in the immediate vicinity will go faster. Okay. So normally, if you go near a star, the closer you get to the sun, the slower time goes, right? But in an engineered space-time metric, the faster time goes. Okay. And then again, light blue shifts toward higher frequencies. Okay. So if you ever see a UFO land, don't touch it. Okay. So this increased frequencies, okay, in radiation and faster time processes, which would be found in an engineered space-time metric, is what would explain these two things, right? The plants evince premature aging because they age prematurely. Why? Because when that thing landed, time was going faster in its immediate vicinity. Okay. And the plants appeared to had damage consistent with intense levels of radiation because that's what that thing emitted, intense levels of radiation. Okay. And what's really cool for me is that this case happened in 1981. 1981. Okay. That's 13 years before Miguel Alcubierre wrote his warp drive paper, which showed for the first time that warp drive was scientifically possible. Okay. And again, it's 30 years before Puthoff wrote his paper, okay, which was also published in a peer reviewed journal, showing what the effects would be in an engineered space-time metric. Okay. So Trans-en-Provence is one hell of a UFO case. Like I said, look at the links in my description. You'll have the original report and then a follow-up report by Jacques Vallee. Okay. Until then, as always, remember consciousness is not classified. Spend more time looking inward than you do looking upward, and it'll tell you a lot more about what's up there than by reading any UFO book. Thank you.